Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today is Miss Alethea Felton. She is a dynamic, high performance transformational coach, founder of Alethea Felton Coaching LLC, and host of the Power Transformation podcast. With over 20 years of experience in the realms of education, instructional design, and learning and development, Althea's mission is to empower ambitious professionals and leaders to shatter limitations through mindset mastery, unleash their true potential, and create holistic, lasting life success. Our conversation with Althea today is outside of her normal discussion, and I am so glad that she said yes to speaking with us. Oftentimes, I am having conversations with people who are grieving the loss of their spouse, but in the terms of widowhood, we know that people that grieve our loved ones are dear friends. And that is the perspective in which we will discuss today. Let's get into this conversation now.
Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Welcome to the widowhood.
Thank you so much, Tina. I am so happy to be here and thank you for having me.
And I want to say our conversation today may not fit in the wedge that people may be accustomed to because you hear the word widow and automatically the conversation is, what is that connection? And for this, it is, as we talk about the widowhood, it's not always that spouse that passed. This is a community that is impacted when someone transitions from this world. So, our conversation today is for someone that may be thinking of the loss of a dear friend or someone close to them. Because when someone leaves this world, everyone in their community is felt. They feel that loss of that person. So I appreciate you for stepping off into some uncharted territory with this conversation and being willing to share.
I really appreciate that. And I just hope that something that I say can affect someone in a transformative way as this journey has done for me.
Wow, transformative. That is a really good place to start. So let's start with where you are literally in the world today, as far as where your life is in some of your youth, if you would share that.
Sure. So, in terms of where I am today, I am a full time entrepreneur now in terms of profession. So, what that looks like for me is I am a holistic transformational coach, motivational speaker, and podcaster. And when I say full time, I dabbled in entrepreneurship for almost approximately 20 years, part time. But now I have the flexibility and the freedom where I've taken that deep dive into it full time, where I'm building my um, business with speaking, coaching, writing, things of that nature, and podcasting. And I can tell you that this being where I am now is certainly a ride. It's an adventure. It has its highs and its lows. Every day is unpredictable. But also, in terms of just more of where I am, not just in a job space, but I can tell you that every day of my life, I have such peace. I live with great joy. And joy does not mean that every single day is happy necessarily, but I
Yes.
have a consistent joy, a consistent hope and faith. That's where I am in my life right now. That's who I am.
Wow. So how did we get there though? Has this been a space you've lived in your entire life, or is this someplace you've come to recently?
Well, in terms of the emotional aspects of who I am, I've always pretty much been an eternal optimist. I was always the kind of person, even as a little kid, who always saw the glasses half full to overflowing. That's how I always view life. So I've always looked at things in the positive frame of mind, not ignoring the negative, but really in the positive frame of mind. I can tell you that with my life, in terms of where I am, I was born with certain conditions that frankly made chapters of my life quite challenging. But in order to get here, I had to go through a series of hard knocks, heartache, pain, grief to get me to where I am now. And in terms of the entrepreneurial journey, I'm a former public school educator, and I use the term educator because I had more roles outside of the classroom. So I was a classroom teacher, but for 20 years I worked in the field of education as a English teacher, Spanish teacher, instructional coach, department chairperson, team leader, and I ended my career in human resources where I was coaching seasoned and new teachers. I was pretty much the one who determined, in a sense, if they kept their employment, pretty much. I loved what I did, ended on a high note, and I was blessed to be able to retire early at the age of 41 last school year. Nothing happened bad or anything like that. It's just that it was time, and I'm a woman of faith, and I knew that God was speaking to me prior to the start of last school year about making this transition. And it didn't make sense at first, but ever since I took that leap and that plunge, I'm here now, and things are just coming together.
Wow,
Mhm.
that is a lot. We're gonna pull that back a little bit, and I want
Yes.
to pick back up where you mentioned about different challenges in
Mhm.
your youth. Can you expound on that a little bit?
Certainly. So, in terms of where I am, in terms of the challenges of my youth, when I said earlier that I was born with autoimmune illness, it's true. I was born as a baby with a defective liver. I had a severe case of jaundice. I was a few weeks early. And when I was born with jaundice, of course, I was completely yellow and really sickly. Now, jaundice, some parents might say that's pretty common in several babies. But the difference with mine was as I continued growing, there were other symptoms that I had where a couple of my toenails, for example, were discolored. And I used to think as a toddler, I can remember this vividly as a 3-year-old, I just thought God painted my toenails. So I just had, brown toenails. So, oh, God painted them, or black here, this and the other. And so I just always felt, oh, God painted my toes. I'm thinking that as a little kid. And then I was just very sickly. I was extremely stunted in my growth, and ironically, I'm 5'9" now. I had a major growth spurt as a preteen, but I had stunted growth. I was always really sick. My mom and dad would take me to my regular checkups. Now, I was a child who was raised in the 80s and 90s, and so back in the day, went to all of my doctor's appointments, did what I was supposed to do, but my mother just kept saying, "There's something wrong."
Mm,
And unfortunately, her concerns fell on deaf ears because back then, young girl, Black child, and not trying to make it about race. I've had doctors of all colors, and my mom comes from a multi ethnic background. So it's not about race, it was more so about just standard procedure for back then. They
mhm.
didn't do as many tests. So I was always kind of in pain. I vomited a lot. I was just always feeling under the weather. And there did come a point where even my own dad thought that my mom could have been worrying too much,
Okay.
but my mother kept saying something's wrong. So I continued to live a normal life, so as to speak, but it wasn't until my 20s actually
Mhm.
where I got really sick and they did discover that, oh, you have had this defective liver literally ever since you were born. And many of the doctors then were so shocked that I had lived that long. And then later on in my 30s, I was diagnosed with another condition of the gastrointestinal area, which was Crohn's disease. And so living with the liver and with Crohn's, and the condition of the liver now as we know it is called primary sclerosing cholangitis, which is hardening of the bile ducts. My original diagnosis was autoimmune hepatitis type 1. I say original because Tina, life is something and God is powerful. That is an incurable condition as well. But as of today, there's no trace of the
Mm.
autoimmune hep in my body, which baffles a lot of doctors. But the PSC, or the primary sclerosing cholangitis, is there. And that's hardening of the bile ducts. And what can happen is that it eventually could cause me to have a transplant. Some patients do have transplants, others don't. But I'm talking like it's normal because I've learned to just go with the flow.
Right, because I don't have much of a poker face, so I'm not sure if my eyes were getting bigger and bigger with each thing you were saying. I was like, okay. And so in all of that, as a toddler, one,
Mhm.
that you had memories of that age.
Oh, yeah.
Two, that sense of being positive seemed to be something that you came into this world with. This
Hmm.
wasn't something, and it may have been, you may have developed it over time, but you started with that. And the other thing, mama know what mama know. Like there is nothing when mothers know something about their child and
Hmm.
they stay persistent, eventually it will come out. And you're right, there is something about how people's voices are heard
Hmm.
and what that looks like and what we know now in treating people than what we knew several years ago. That
That's right.
changes and it empowers people.
Hmm.
And there's just so much to be said about that. And it's not, I mean, yes, there are statistics about people of color, how they are heard in different spaces and what that looks like. That's not an argument. Those are facts statistically if someone wants to run the numbers and look at all that. But we still learn how to show up in life and in spaces to be able to
Hmm.
be who we are, regardless of those facts and the things that we have to push through.
That's right.
When you hear the word friend, what comes to mind?
Her friend.
Yeah, friend.
Mm. When I hear the word friend, what comes to mind is confidant, laughter, safe space, um, love, good times. That's what comes to mind when I think of friend.
Mm. And who are
And that just touched a little something in here that I didn't expect.
I saw when you said love and you paused, I said, I mean, I'm not sure if we're gonna get her back because she has went there. I could see that.
Yeah.
And so who are those
Mm.
people that you connect to those words?
Well, um, let me just preface this because a lot of people will hear this, but I just want to say that that several people come to mind, but the two that hit the forefront, when I think of friend, the two names that come instantly are Shadari and Nakisha. Those are the two names that just stood out first and foremost.
Okay.
Hmm.
And who would you like to talk about first?
Shadari. I'll
Okay.
talk about Shadari. Shadari is just, if I think about comedy, think about Shaderi,
Okay.
because there's always laughter, there's always a joke, there's always some witty antic that Shaderi is going to say that just lights up the entire room.
Okay.
Okay. And it's interesting that now as I'm talking, I realize I'm putting everything in present tense because of the fact that Shaderi is a friend of mine who has transitioned.
Okay.
And she was just somebody that was like a little sister to me. I used to know how many years apart we were, but I can't remember now because she's been frozen in earthly time, so to speak. She's
Yes.
been frozen in earthly time. And I know that when she was on this side, I knew exactly how many years apart we were. It wasn't a huge gap, but she was like a little sister to me. And when I was going through so many of my health challenges, she was right there. I remember one night when I was sick, I had just come out of the hospital. I was on complete bed rest. And my sister and I lived together at the time. We owned a home jointly. And she came over to our house and brought everything to make a spaghetti dinner. And I love pasta. Anybody that knows me knows I love pasta. And she knew I couldn't eat a lot, but it was just the fact she came and just didn't buy them from any place. She was very strategic about getting organic ingredients. She was super health conscious, organic ingredients and everything. And we just had a night of spaghetti, Italian bread, movies, and just a great old time. And a few years later, after that happened, she was preparing to get married. She was finishing up grad school, and she was coaching. I want to say volleyball. I think she was coaching at the time because she was a teacher. And I remember a phone call with her one night. This was in December. And she said to me, my nickname's Lily. She said, Lily, what does it mean if a person has black stools? And I said, that means that you need to go to the doctor. That's what that means. And she said, well, I'm planning for the wedding in a few months and I have this, but I promise afterwards I'll go. And I said, okay, I was unsettled. But about 5, 6 months later, she went to the doctors because one morning, this was 2 weeks after she got married, she couldn't get out of the bed. She was in that much pain. Her husband took her to the hospital. She called me after work and she said to me, I need you to come to the hospital. And I said, what's wrong? She said, I'll tell you when you get here. And this intuition, Tina, inside of me, just clear as I'm talking to you, said, she has cancer. And I
Mm.
said, do you have cancer? And she said, yes. So I went to the hospital and she was diagnosed in 2015, spring of 2015, with stage 4 colon cancer. She at the time was almost 30 and she transitioned June of 2017 at the age of 32.
I'm just gonna let that sit for a moment.
Yeah.
That that's a lot.
hmm
I'm going to guess the spaghetti dinner was one of your favorite memories with her. Can you share another favorite memory with her?
There's so many.
Pick one
Okay.
up.
Another, there's so many favorite memories of her. Another favorite memory, we sang on the praise and worship team at our church. And I remember a memory, oh gosh, there's so many of them. This was during the time she was going through her cancer journey. I happened to be on short-term disability at the time in 2017, where I was cleared to drive again, but I was still off work, but I was allowed to just go back and forth to her house. Her husband let me sit with her many days when
Mm.
he was working during the day, and I'm very grateful for that. But the gospel artist or Fred Hammond was planning to do a workshop for everybody in the music ministry from my church. And she asked me if I could come and give her a ride to the workshop. And she was pretty sick by then, but I told her, of course. And the reason why that's one of the most favorite memories is because all in the car, we were just laughing and singing and having a great time. And then when she got to the workshop, one of Fred Hammond's background singers at the time, I can't think of her name, but Shadari was really a fan of hers, and she followed her on social media and all of that, and she was able to take a picture with
Hmm.
her and Fred Hammond and all of them, and just made her day. So when I was driving her back home, she was really quiet in the car, and I said, "What?" And she said to me, "I can't believe that I had the chance to meet her." And I said, "You know what, girl?" I said, "After you get well, you can see her some more, or you can keep in touch." And she just got quiet. She didn't say anything, but that was a favorite memory because it brought her a lot of joy that day.
I can
Yeah.
see that.
Mhm. Yeah.
I, being a widow myself,
Mhm.
I know that my friends would never compare the pain of their friendship being disconnected, losing my husband, until I asked them,
Mm.
because there's no different. But I know my friends experience pain of my
Mhm.
husband's death because of the relationship that was in existence. And just like, obviously her husband's loss is a different conversation. And we're not doing this by any means to diminish what his loss is, but we're talking
Mhm.
about from the perspective of a friend.
Yeah.
What does that loss look like for you in your life? What did that create?
Oh, it created a lot because and this is why I like you as a podcaster, is because you create a safe space just by your presence. So I won't go as in depth here with the point that I'm going to say, based on still respect for that, but I'll put it like this.
But you are
The
welcome to
last
expand however you want to. And
Yeah,
that's
but
why I set it up that
yes,
way, for that
yes.
exact reason.
Exactly. And I preface this part. I will answer your question, but I preface this part by saying one of the things that I value the most, and I guess is part of what I miss, is that the last 3 months of her life on earth, it's I didn't realize this until she was gone, but she, and I'm going to say, used me not in a negative sense, but she used me as a sounding board. It
Mm,
was almost like deathbed confessions.
okay. She
Where,
leveraged that friendship. She leveraged that closeness.
uh-huh, where
Yes,
she poured certain things out to me that, of course, I will take to my grave.
right.
That she had, that it was such an honor knowing that she felt safe with me to just
Mm,
be able to just get everything out. And some of the things that she shared with me, I know for a fact nobody else knows, not even her mom. And her mom really was grateful for me for having that space. And so when she left the earth, she didn't leave me, but when she left the earth, another thing that made our friendship more powerful is that she is the one person on this planet where I literally was in the room when she took her last breath.
mm,
And it was me and a few other people, but it's literally like she held on until I got there. I'm not exaggerating. She held on until I got there. And once I got there and her husband told her I was there, she kind of turned her head and saw I was there, and then she started her exit out and passed away within a half hour of my being there. And so, with her being gone, when she passed immediately, of course, it feels surreal and
Mm.
you're numb. And it took a while to take the texts out of my phone, to take out her phone number. But now, 7 years later, there are still times where I just want to tell her something, or I want to call her, or I want to see her in the physical, or I wonder, would she have been a mommy as she always desired and didn't have the chance to be on earth? And in terms of just me, it's more of now like, Shaderi, I wish you could see who I am. Because leading up to her death, Tina, she told me, she said, Lily, you give and pour so much out to everybody else. She said, but I want you to start really focusing on you and being the best version of yourself you can be. She was talking about all of that kind of stuff prior to it being popular and trendy now.
Right.
And so that is what I miss the most, is just spending the time with her, but also the fact that I didn't get to thank her for trusting me so much. I just didn't realize it until after she left, that those last 3 months, particularly, I mean, gosh, that was such a gift and an honor.
So if she was here now, what would you tell her in that thank you?
I would say, girl, you are amazing. And Shaderi, I am just grateful for the times that we shared together. I'm thankful for how you loved me enough and saw so much in me that I didn't see in myself, to say you owe this to yourself to do this so that you can be of greater influence and have God to use you fully in the way that He has intended. And I would say, Derry, I'm just very, very thankful for you. I'm thankful for adding extra light to my life. I miss you so much, but I know that I will see you yet again. And I thank you for the time that you did come to me in a dream. I know that was you. And I'm very, very thankful and blessed to have known you. And I will also tell her to give her mom a hug and kiss for me, because since then her mom has also transitioned.
Mm.
Yup.
How have her words changed, impacted, redirected your life?
First of all, in the area of relationships, ooh, that was a game changer. She having them sister girl conversations about, girl, you don't need to waste your time with these jokers and and all that stuff.
Them
So
Rudy Poos,
first,
swipe
yeah.
left, gone.
And and this is probably the first time I've been public about that, because people hear my health journey and stuff. I don't really talk about the heartbreak and the heartache and the agony of stuff I've had over the years that have helped to get me here, where that was one major area she was big on. And I wasn't ever the kind of person to, like, sleep around. It was more so I allowed myself to kind of be put on strings, and not valuing myself enough to know when I was getting played,
Girl, you
as
about to make this a
opposed
whole
to,
different conversation now.
yeah.
So,
And so,
okay,
yeah.
yes.
And so that's, yeah.
Yes.
So that's what she really rammed into me at first. And so the shift and the transition with that is that all of these years later, I have a wonderful man. And it took Derry kind of telling me that, which started me on my therapy and my counseling journey. Then the other thing is just more so about knowing more of me. I was always good for discerning and giving others that wise counsel, but sometimes I couldn't take it upon myself, or I was blinding myself to things that I needed to fix in me. And so one of the transformative things she did in my life was, again, set me on that road to getting the help I needed to heal from certain traumas, because I used to be ignorant and thinking, okay, I had a great childhood, I've had a pretty good life. And I was ignorant to the fact that even people who come from good backgrounds can still have trauma and still have junk. And then, even with my health history, like, I needed to grieve even aspects of that, of knowing I had these conditions that were so taxing and draining on my physical, emotional, even my spiritual health. And so Derry was the one, when she passed, I sought grief counseling, and it was from there that my therapist said, okay, let me send you to this grief group. Are you open to individual counseling? And at first I said, well, I had that, but that was some years prior when I was in some, family counseling. But I took, for the first time, August of 2017, I started my therapy journey and my healing journey. And it is because of dairy that I did that,
Thank
which is
you.
major,
A few,
major life-changing experience.
few things.
Mhm.
What would you say to someone who says, but you believe in God? Why are you going to a therapist?
Because God is not a genie in a bottle, and he doesn't grant wishes, and he works through people. And that is why I chose therapy. Now, I chose to go to a Christian-based counselor because I needed the word of God incorporated in those counseling sessions also. But even if it were not a Christian counselor, it is because of the fact that it's like, if you're having a heart attack, I don't know anyone in his or her right mind who's going to sit at home and just pray, oh Lord, take away this heart attack. No, you're going to call 911. You're going to go to a cardiologist and get them to help you. The brain is an organ, just like the liver, the skin, the lungs, and the heart. And when our brain needs some extra treatment and extra love and support, then I'm going to go to a counselor or whomever specializes in that area to get me what I need, because the God I serve doesn't want me to walk in foolishness either. So that's why.
Thank you. Thank you
Mhm,
so much. You talked about dairy changing how you saw yourself and
mhm,
value yourself. It sounds as if once you came to a different perspective of that, it changed who you allowed into your space.
mhm.
Can you talk about that? How that showed up in life?
It didn't happen immediately. I can't say that. It didn't happen immediately. Um, and I'm not sure exactly where you want me to make the transition, but a lot of that happened in 2019 with Nakisha, where it had to kind of take two circumstances changing that. A lot of the shifting of who I allowed in my space, honestly, that really started happening during the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah, that
So
really started happening during the pandemic. A little bit prior to then, where a couple of moves I made and shifts in people happened a few months prior to the pandemic, but it was really in the pandemic where I truly got an awakening.
okay.
Yeah.
So let's do you wanna I don't want to leave her dairy, but do we want to shift into how do we what does that look like
I
as far
think
as
I think they go hand in hand, because
okay.
ironically enough, something that I didn't mention is when Derry passed and transitioned, the first person I called, I had left her house and I stood outside. The first person I called was Nakisha. That's the
Nikisha.
first person that I called and told her that Derry had passed. And in terms of, I think I can talk about Keisha's separately. Let me say this about Derry.
Okay.
In terms of how it did cause it, is during the pandemic, I did think about a lot of the principles and the practices that I had learned during therapy and knowing more about myself and my value and my worth. Okay. I was never the kind of person where I don't think I necessarily had low self esteem. I was just kind of overly friendly and just letting any and everybody in my space trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. I wasn't a people pleaser. It's not as if I was trying to do things to get people to like me. It was just that I have a big heart and I found myself overextending myself and being depleted in return with a lot of people. So, what I did during the pandemic was that time of quarantine or just reflection on a lot of different things um made me be much more introspective and thinking about how do I want to come out on the other side of this? What am I going to do more purposeful for my life? And how am I going to show up in this next chapter of life? And so I started really seeking God about giving me greater wisdom, discernment, understanding of people who's in my circle, who am I always calling and texting, always. And I'm talking about even before the pandemic, but yet not even getting a text or a call back. Little subtle things like that. Or yes, I'm grateful for all of the people who showed up for me in the hospital and things of that nature. But Derry also said to me, be aware of the people who are just there to spectate versus the people who are really there praying, showing support, and being genuine about it. And in the pandemic, I did learn about a few people who were almost, in a sense, sounded a little disappointed that my health was doing so well because it was so used to me being sick for all of those years. And I had to learn how to distance myself. So there were certain circumstances like that where I just had to be more aware of who I was letting in my space and also being fair to myself too, saying that just as I outgrow people, there are going to be people who are going to outgrow me. So I'm not going to make this a one-sided thing, is that some people may have also chosen to walk away from me, and that's okay. Is that not everybody was a right fit for me or them in the next season of life. And that meant for certain sister friends that I thought that I had. One of my closest friends at the time just abruptly in 2021 just abruptly ended our friendship, no rhyme or reason to it. And I couldn't be bitter or angry or hurt because that's her journey in life. And so I had to be mindful of the fact that as the world turns, everybody on this planet is really doing the best they can with what they have. So dairy got me to also see myself as, yes, I might have overextended myself, but never make myself out to be the victim, but to really pray about who you want strategically in your life moving forward. And so now in this chapter that I'm in, I can really see how some people have stayed, other people have gone by the wayside. And I used to even be stuck in a mindset that I've heard others have, where I felt like, oh, I'm good with all of my friends. I don't need any more friends in my circle. I know personally, and this is no offense to anybody who might have that mindset, but I feel that was very, very foolish, because some of the people I've met now and I'm developing new bonds with, oh my goodness, my life is so much more richer with them in it.
Yes, because yes to everything.
Mhm.
Yes to um, people not being okay when you're better and just being settled with a sick relationship.
Mhm.
Yes, okay to strategically choosing who we allow to stay in these spaces in our life. We may have bumped into each other at the grocery store, may have had a connection. Sometimes I find we may take relationships further than they are really meant to serve either person.
Mhm.
and being okay to say that we've come to where we need to come with. It's okay for people to just know that it doesn't always have to be the same way, always in life. And those things, giving ourselves permission just to let things go when they no longer work and to keep them when they are, it's not like you said, a victim mentality. It's just the flow of life. Everything just doesn't stay the same. It does not. I
Mhm,
want to ask you one other question about dairy.
mhm,
What did your grief look like, and how did your grief surprise you in her
mm.
absence?
My grief looked like one of the worst Crohn's disease flares I've ever had in my life. I'm glad you asked that question, Tina, because I forgot that. And that's a key point here. Okay. She passed away June 12th, 2017. So my grief looked different, of course, but this is how it started. June 12th, 2017 was her funeral. Her husband and her family allowed me to have a lot of influence in trying to be the correspondent, the liaison, so to speak, between the church and the program and trying to get everything kind of organized and structured with that because at the time I was
Girl, that
very
was a gift for them. Let me just tell you, because my brother did that. Because I was like,
oh
Y'all want
wow.
me to make complete sentences? Y'all want me to do stuff? Like, y'all want me? I couldn't drive. My brother, we were
Mm,
driving. My brother's like, can I have the keys? I was like, yeah, that makes sense.
wow.
So let me just say, it was an honor for you, but it was a gift for them to be able
Oh.
to entrust that to somebody, because you're still, no matter how long they were sick or was, now they are gone.
Mhm.
So go ahead,
Mhm.
but I want you to know that was a
Thank
gift.
you. Thank you. I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I was that in between person because and our church is a mega church. I didn't join it when it was, but over the years I saw it blow up to that, right?
Mhm.
And so with that being said, there were a lot of moving parts, but since I still had direct access to senior pastor, other people, and I was very active, I was able to really help things go a lot smoothly. And so I was doing that. Then at the time, I was still teaching. So I was ending out a school year. Thank God for my principal at the time who really had a heart and compassion and understood everything going on. Just like on the day Derry passed, she let me leave work early because she knew this was about to happen, right? So that started then. So the day of the funeral, everything a great turnout. Literally the next day, and you will probably be like, what in the world did you do that for? The next day, I went on a missions trip the day after her funeral because it was already planned. I was one of the Spanish translators on the trip. They told me, Lily, are you sure you want to still go? I'm like, oh, yes, because I'm running on adrenaline then, right? So I'm like, oh, yes. So I go on this missions trip. It was only a week, but about day 4 or 5 into the trip, I get and I'll keep this G rated, but I experienced some bleeding that I knew was not normal.
This is called
And
real talk. Talk like you want to talk.
oh,
These
okay,
grown ups.
okay,
Oh yeah,
perfect.
no, we ain't nobody
Thank
doing that.
you.
No. Riddlehood,
Okay,
real
yeah. So
talk.
okay, thank
Okay,
you,
so this
thank
your moment
you.
to get out if you want
Yes,
to. Go ahead, girl. Talk
thank
your talk.
you, Tina. So about day 4 or 5, I'm not having any pains or anything like that. But I go to the bathroom, wipe myself, and there's blood on my tissue. And I said,
Mm.
oh my gosh, I knew exactly what it was. But in my head, I'm like, well, we only got a couple more days. I can thug it out. So I'm like, I can thug it out. It's all good. So I'm acting like everything's okay, going through the motions. So the next day, all day long, when I'm going to the bathroom, specifically when I'm having my bowel movements, is blood. And I'm
Uh,
already knowing, like, oh gosh, this is a flare up. Okay, this is how I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go back to the States. I'm gonna tell my sister, hey, Dina, take me to the hospital. They're gonna have me in
okay.
the hospital. But then finally, whenever God speaks to me, he doesn't let me sleep. And
Okay.
it's very annoying and it's very aggravating. And I've told him that I don't like when you do that to me.
Obviously, you
So,
do not care.
like, I don't like that. So I tried to get some sleep and I was tossing and turning, and the Holy Spirit said, you got to tell somebody. So it was this lady at the time at my church that I was very, very close to at the time. And I happened to tell her, I said, okay, what if I was to tell you that? And I told her what was happening. She said, oh no, we have to tell so and so. So basically, she said we had to tell the leader of the trip. And I'm like, no, because we're leaving in a couple of days. It's all good. She said, no. So the word got round. Lily's sick. So I had to get an emergency flight home, and the other leader of the trip flew back with me so I wouldn't be alone. And I end up in the hospital. And again, it's an all out Crohn's disease flare up, the worst I had in my life, where it was so much internal bleeding that they were not sure how in the world they were going to get it to stop. I was critical, just a mess, right? And so I shared that because what I found out later on is that a lot of my Crohn's flare-ups are directly triggered to bad stress. And if it's not managed properly, that's what'll happen. And so when they started to assess has what's been happening, what's been going on, and when they found out that I literally had buried one of my best friends, then went on a mission trip, then came back, they said, oh no, your stress and grief caused this flare. So I was in the hospital for quite a while, discharged, put on bed rest, and I had no choice but to be still. And in that stillness, because even when I was on the trip, I didn't get a chance to like cry or feel sad because I was going, going, going. But when I was put in that hospital, I couldn't escape the memories. I couldn't escape her voice. I couldn't escape replaying when she transitioned and exited, replaying what it looked like to see her take that last breath. I couldn't escape it. And I had no choice but to lean into it and to start the process of it. So that's how the grief started. Then in August, when I started therapy, I just expected to get the grief counseling. But no, my therapist, who is still there today, she had a nerve to say, I want to do one-on-one therapy with you.
The
And
nerve,
so
the
the nerve,
audacity.
I know,
Mm.
right? The
And
unmitigated
she
thought from
did.
her. And she did, right? And so when I went to grief therapy, it was through a program that was called Grief Share. And I loved it. I loved every bit of Grief Share. And I liked it because it was on like a rolling basis. So I actually did it a couple of times. And that really helped me tremendously. And so it started off with the um more of that physical pain and agony, but yet during that transition, I decided that I was going to still make the best of this situation and really work on myself. So it started off with the sickness. Then as the time went on, it really transitioned into the healing. And just as I started to feel more peace with Derry's death, it took about 2 years. That's when another tragedy struck.
But I want to pause right there and
Mhm,
thank you so much for sharing so much,
mhm,
because people that we're connected to fe- feel our loss. But people want to say, well, she's just a friend. That those words don't correlate to that pain of that loss. And some people feel like, well, I'm a friend, I really shouldn't be that upset, or
Hmm.
those different things. What would you say if someone is listening to this conversation and they've had a very close friend transition from this world and they're struggling with the reality of their own grief? What would you tell them?
I would tell them that sometimes friends are closer than your own family members. And just because we didn't share blood, she was still my sister. She was it's almost like telling an adoptive parent that their child really isn't their child, so you shouldn't have that much love for their child because you didn't birth them. In the same vein, with a friend, yes, she would it was the closeness we had. It was the intimacy we have, and I use that word, in, of course, not a perverted or a romantic way. It was that sisterly intimacy that we had, that we shared as friends. I mean, just really being the true essence of what a friend is. And so, for a person who might be having a challenge in that area or could almost be afraid of really feeling what they feel, it's all right. Lean into it. Go into it. Let that wave hit you. I learned this in grief share about, the analogy of the wave of a wave coming and you sticking your feet in the sand and you know that that wave is gonna come, right? But you lean into it and you let it hit you, and it may be overwhelming and powerful, but just know it will subside and you'll still be standing. You might be drenched. And so there may be somebody listening right now where you might be afraid to just lean into it, but I'm telling you, when you do and when you feel what you gotta feel, and it will look different for everybody. You might not be a crier. I'm not a huge crier. And so I didn't cry a lot, but Lord knows I felt the loss. I felt the mind tripping like this makes no sense. I don't understand how somebody could be so healthy, so health conscious, and to get this freak form of stage 4 colon cancer. And that's what happened to her. Even the doctor said it was literally what they consider just a once in an astronomical amount chance of her getting it because she was so strategic about her lifestyle. And so a person battling with that, we grieve because we've loved. And if you love that friend, like you say you do, it's okay. It is okay to embrace that loss so that you can then almost like emerge out of that cocoon as this beautiful, vibrant butterfly. That's what your friend would want you to do. You're muted, Tina. Mhm.
That that is beautiful. That is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Mhm.
And so I'm just going to keep it moving.
Yeah.
2 years later, the next wave. What does that look like?
Nakisha was my okay. Dairy again, like I said, she was like my little sister. Nakisha and I were so close that my parents literally called her their third daughter. Nakisha and I often have to kind of give disclaimers or clarity because sometimes if a person asks me how many siblings do I have, I'll say, well, I have two sisters, but one passed away. That's how very close Keisha and I were. Um, Nakisha was sunshine in human form. She was the most bubbly, giggly, fun loving person you could ever meet. She was 3 years older than I. And we too connected at church. Derry and her didn't know each other because they were on the praise and worship team different times. But Keisha was one of the first friends I met when I moved to Washington, D.C. She was originally from Texas. She was married, had a son, and we just instantly, we used to talk about, okay, do you remember the exact first day we met? Not really. But I just know it was an instant connection and we were sisters from day one. So close, in fact, that a couple of years prior to her passing, she surprised me, Tina, and transferred to the school where I taught. She knew my principal and got a job there. And look, she was so good with it that I didn't know until we went to our first
Orientation or
week back,
something?
or yeah, as teachers. So I'm going in my staff meeting and I see her and it was so crazy. She kept that so under wraps for me. And she just loved surprising me. It was like, I remember you.
Oh,
And so even at the school, although the other staff members knew we were best friends, everybody knew we were sisters. And so she and her husband were actually the witnesses to my living will. So after she passed, I had to get all of that
mm.
changed. But she even was that one that was right there for me. And I had another flare the last time I was hospitalized, and I'm praying that it'll stay that way, was almost 5 years ago when I had a flare up, August of 2019. And again, that was due to the stress. It wasn't as bad as the one in 2017, but it was still serious. And Nakisha, I spent my birthday in the hospital then. My birthday is August 27th. And I was in the hospital then. And my sister threw me a birthday party in my hospital room. And a couple of friends came by and I mean, did it up, decorated the room. Nakisha by then was really sick and battling. She ended up with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She had a 5-month battle, 5 months. And in August of 2019, I knew she couldn't leave the house and travel like that. Tina, we in there having a good old time, and I'm just partying from my hospital bed. In comes on a walker, Nakisha, her husband, and their son. This girl knew she was supposed to be home. And it's a picture, no, it's some video footage I have that I just cherish, where she's standing by me and I'm in my hospital bed and she just dancing and shaking. She loved to dance and she's dancing. And so Keisha was just, I mean, that was my sister. And so even for my own sister, who is 3 years older, my own blood sister, what I even had to do in my grief, I had to take a step back because my family grieved her. Not to say they didn't for Derry, but the relationship was different, where
Right.
my mother still to this day can get choked up because she felt like she lost her daughter. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's how it was. And so we spent Thanksgivings together. I love to cook. I'm a former caterer, all of that. And so every Thanksgiving, with her being from Texas, she and her husband, it was a tradition for years. They would just come over to my house and have Thanksgiving every year. And she made the best lemon chess pies. That's an old school pie, lemon chess pies. And she used to make those every Thanksgiving. And so when Keisha passed, I remember when she was diagnosed. I remember when she broke the news. And I just remember the emotion of just feeling just kind of like a balloon with air, and it gets slowly just lets it out. I just had a very hard time processing that because she was diagnosed at stage 4, and just like Derry,
Yes.
it was another literally another freak form of cancer, because Derry and her went through all of these different types of DNA testing, and they had the types of cancers where, especially with Keisha's never went through 1, 2, and 3. Hers automatically showed up in her body at stage 4 pancreatic.
Mm.
So it was the oddest thing. And she got diagnosed at a time in her life when she was going to the gym and exercising actively and all of this good stuff happening in her life. And yeah, Keisha's death really affected me. But the difference is Shadari's death helped to prepare me, because I didn't take Keisha's as hard as I thought that I would have. Not to say it didn't hurt. Of course, it still hurt, but I knew how to navigate it more. I knew how to understand my emotions behind it. And just like with Derry, I had intimate moments. I had so much time with Keisha during that journey where I was taking her to appointments. We were having private times together. She was talking to me about a lot in that last week of hospice. I thank God for her husband, and he and I will admit, we didn't always see things eye to eye, but I will never disparage him and I will never talk ill against him, because again, as a husband, he still allowed me unlimited access
Mm.
to his wife. And I knew when to lean back. I knew when to do what I needed to do. But I will always be thankful to him for the fact that he knew that we were sisters, and he was like a brother-in-law to me. And so I am very grateful that he allowed me to be in that space. And even when she passed, again, there I was yet again doing a lot to help prepare for that funeral. And the woman who I told you about from a couple of years prior, who I told about me being sick on the trip,
Yes.
I contacted her because she had experience helping patients with cancer.
Okay.
So I connected her with Keisha, and Miss Clarinda became, I mean, a rock, a surrogate mother, because Keisha's mom was in Texas, mine was also out of state, and she stepped in and
Mm.
really helped from day one of that diagnosis all the way until she transitioned. So I knew how to rally community when it came to Keisha. And both women, Derry and Keisha, they kept the faith all the way until the end. They really did. In both of their situations, the last week of their life is when they came to an acceptance that they would not be healed on earth, but it would be a heavenly healing. Yeah.
And so now these two women, you honor them in your living. What does that look like now? How did that change? How did you get from where you were to where you are now?
It looks like full courage. It looks like no time to waste. It looks like do it even if you're not exactly sure how it's all going to work out, but you see the end goal and just doing it anyway, even if others don't understand, even if it makes others uncomfortable, because it exposes something in them that's still a bit insecure. It doesn't look arrogant, it doesn't look cocky, but it looks like resilience and it looks like perseverance when the odds seem stacked and piled against you. It looks like me really saying, you know what, girl, Lily, you are amazing. You are so beautiful, girl. Oh, look at how you are still here knocking it out the park. And when I say still here, I'm not even talking about with the health stuff, because I don't fear death. I really don't. I've had near death experiences, literally, which is a whole other different podcast show. But my whole point is that it doesn't look uncertain. It doesn't look not sure. It doesn't look like, what are people gonna think if I say this and that? No, it is truly to see these ladies who were by my bedside for all those years. And when the script flipped and the tables turned, it's literally like, yo, it's mind-blowing. It is so mind-blowing because these were the friends that I thought I was gonna grow old with, where we would be little old biddies cackling and laughing and all that kind of stuff, right? So now that it's different, they poured into me so much where who I am now is who they always saw that I didn't see at the time. And I see it now. I see it now. Because I even remember this was maybe a month prior to Keisha passing, and she was in the hospital at the time. And I remember just being by her bedside, and I just cried, like sobbed. And I said to her, literally, I said, how am I supposed to continue living and going on without you? It was literally like just, I just didn't know how to do it. And I wasn't like dependent on her. But again, I saw this vision of us as sister friends. She said after she got better, we were going to go to a particular Cuban restaurant and we were going to do this and do that together. And I said, but how is it me, her, Dino? We all would go to my blood sister. We would go to concerts together. And so it's like, it was the Three Musketeers. How am I going to do all of this without you? What do I do? And she, in all of her weakness, and was so firm and stern, and she said, Lily, you must live. You must live. She just told me, she said, you must live. She said, you will be okay. She said, it's going to be all right. She said, if I don't make it out of this alive over here, you already know I would want you to not just give up on your life or on anything. And I remember she said more to me, but that was the kick in the pants I needed. And I remember just feeling so scared, Tina, and so afraid because I really couldn't imagine my life without her. Even if I moved away and she moved away, we had plans to cheer each other's dreams. And then she had so many dreams she shared with me that I was hopeful were going to get fulfilled. And so, you know, that's a loaded answer, but it's just so much behind it because I never, ever saw either of them passing before me. Never.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you spoke about having a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
What is the focus of your podcast and those conversations?
The Power Transformation podcast is my podcast. And due to time, I can't get as in depth with that story, but the catalyst behind that has to do with my godmother, who has since passed away. But the Power Transformation podcast started off as a podcast where I was going to talk about holistic wellness principles, how to take the power within you to make different lifestyle changes. And while some of my solo episodes are me, I launched December 7th, 2022, and episodes come out every Wednesday. What happened was when I started interviewing guests, it really shifted the way I started to view the podcast. Because what I noticed, Tina, is it didn't matter if I had somebody talking about clutter and how to get clutter out of your life, or if I interviewed a personal trainer, or even someone I had up there talking about beading, beading, and the power of beads and wearing waist belts. Every single story, I heard this common thread of, oh my gosh, they all have experienced some type of life changing event, no matter how great or small, but it got them to really examine their life and think about how they could not necessarily wallow or stay stuck in the challenge, but how they use their lives to really help influence others. So, the Power Transformation podcast is how I early on kind of wanted it, but wasn't sure how to word it. Is that it gives people these messages of hope, resilience, courage, transformation, and global impact, a global effect on the world, one person at a time. And that is what the power transformation is about showing everybody, whether you are a custodian or whether you are Oprah Winfrey herself, that every single person has something inside of them if we take time to tap into it, to know that we often have many of the answers ourselves. We have the power deep within ourselves. And if we would just simply walk in that God-given power towards our destinies to help others and to not keep it within ourselves. I have this motto that I do try to live by, and I first heard it from my pastor, Keith Battle, and it says, die empty, meaning that I want to leave this earth poured out with all of the gifts inside of me. And that's what I'm seeing is happening on my podcast, is that these guests are doing simple things, whether in some, it could be writing their own homes. They might not even have family, but it's just the way that they live their lives making a difference. Or it could be people who have a global community and are affecting the world. But my hope is that listeners, young and those who are more, seasoned, will be able to say, you know what? Until I take my last breath, I still have some work to do and I can still help the life of someone else. That is what the Power Transformation podcast is about.
Mm,
Mhm.
that gotta check it out. Gotta check it out. And I'm sure when your listeners hear this conversation, they will hear a part of you that they never heard before, a part of
Mhm.
your journey, and understand more why you show up the way you do,
Oh, yeah.
the way you
Yeah.
show up as a coach, the way you show up in life, to step out and retire at the age of 41 and follow what you hear God telling you to do. I'm
Mhm.
sure each thing that you've spoken about, each of these women is a strong impact to deciding to, what does she say? You must live and not
Yeah.
give up on your life.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. So, yes, although these health challenges have been a part of me, I'm telling you, it took these women transitioning to really make me show up fully for who I am and where I'm supposed to be. Yeah, all the way. And grateful. It's the greatest gift that they really could have given me. And it's as if they saw it and knew it and they had the insight then.
Mm,
That's what is so astonishing to me. That's what's so even humbling to me. Like, oh my gosh, that's love. That is love. It really is love, Tina. And if
yes,
people would just open themselves up, you don't have to have a ton of friends, but just make yourself available for somebody to just be there for you. It's okay, you
yes,
know? Mhm.
indeed. we have covered a lot in this conversation. I would allow you to close this discussion. Maybe there's something you thought we may have talked about that you wanted to cover, or just what you would like to say to those that were tuning in.
Well, um, I said we wouldn't have time to talk about it a lot, but I think just briefly, and I'll keep it brief, I think it's important also on this grief journey to honor my late godmother, Sandra.
Okay.
She was an incredible woman. Sadly, she passed away due to not the virus itself, but she had contracted it from some healthcare workers who were caring for her, and her body couldn't shake the aftermath of it. So that's how she ended up passing away. She was 78 years young when she passed, but I say she was an incredible woman because she lived with cerebral palsy her entire life. And that was very rare because somebody in her generation, born in the 1940s, doctors didn't think she would live past childhood. And she beat all of those odds. Mentally, her cognition and her intellect were sky high. But of course, she had the, straight speech, slurred speech, legs deformed, but she used her arms to kind of walk about. Sandra was also a cousin. I'm a Southerner, and sometimes in Black Southern families, not all the time, but sometimes a godparent is often a relative. And so she was also a cousin of mine. But the reason why I mention her is because I launched the podcast on what would have been her birthday, December 7th. She was born a year after Pearl Harbor. So she was born December 7th, 1942. But anyway, my whole point is Sandra was so influential in my life. And she is one of the people who always gave me life-giving affirmations, even before affirmations were popular. She was the one who never let my conditions be a crutch for me because she, having lived in the era she lived in and everything, she beat so many odds. She was unmarried and didn't have children. She was in love once. This is a neat tidbit. She was actually in love with a white man who had the same condition as her, but in the segregated South back in the day, it just was not possible for them to be together. And so I remember that story was so empowering, even to me, where even when it comes to my friends groups, she always made me say, don't limit who you welcome into your space by race or color. And that was always important to me too. But Sandra, in a last conversation that I had with her, the reason why it hit home for me, she knew she was passing away and she just spoke such life into me. It was on FaceTime because this was still during the pandemic, and she spoke such, I mean, almost like prophetic words into my life. And at the time I didn't have the idea for the podcast or anything like that. And so now when I fast forward to where I am now, I wish that Sandra could see where I am now, but I often have a sense that she has an awareness of it. But Sandra is really a key part of my life as well. And just to be on this podcast, I just wanted the world to know what a beautiful soul that Sandra was, and everybody ought to have a Sandra in their life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing these three
Mhm.
jewels with us. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. And thank you for sharing about Sandra. Yeah, I feel like it would have been incomplete to not bring her into this conversation.
Yeah. That's
So,
my girl. Yes.
so now, however you would like to close out this discussion.
So, the way that I'll just close out this discussion is to say that I never thought that grief would be such a close part of my journey. I had lost loved ones, or I don't even like to say lost. What I'm trying to say is that I knew other people who had passed away, of course, some close. But at the time, I think for me, I had to be in the space to be more open to receiving the help and the support that I needed from the grief. So, what I would close with is for any listener that may listen to this podcast faithfully, or maybe it's your first time and you've kind of brushed aside your feelings of grief, or you say, I'm good in that area. It's okay to kind of let your guard down a little bit and to get the extra help that you need, because no one is an island. And we aren't meant to live life alone and in isolation. So it's all right to go and get the help you need. There are some cases where you can even get free resources. If your budget is a problem, then hey, but it's okay even to make the investment in yourself towards it. Also, everybody has different backgrounds, but I'm telling you, do your best, especially if you aren't sure of what happens beyond this life. I would encourage you to be open to just the possibility that there is more than what meets the eye, and to be prepared to say, you know what, I'm going to make the best of each day that I have here on this planet, because of the fact that I want to leave a legacy. Even if you don't have children, you can still leave a legacy that can outlive you and can touch the lives of other people. So what my grief journey has taught me is to be real and authentic, but by honoring and respecting those that you meet, by listening and being open and receptive to receiving from people what you might need to heal. And I am even grateful for platforms like this. Never would I have imagined that I would be talking on a platform that talks so openly and candidly about grief. But I'm seeing now that if it had not been for those quote unquote losses, then I wouldn't even have the honor of meeting Tina or even being in the presence of all of you. So yeah, this has really helped to bless me, but I want each of you to live your best life, to enjoy the moments, and to continue to trust in a power greater than yourself to get you through each day, day by day. You've got this, and you're stronger than what you think, and you will come out the better for it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.